Okay, so we're recording now. For anyone listening to this recording, we just went over the goal of today's content. And today we're talking about the question, what best describes your relationship to work right now? Are you feeling aligned and energized, successful, but a little relentless? Are you feeling stuck, but a little unsure? Are you feeling fully burnt out or already in some sort of transition? Are you already feeling like you're dabbling in consulting, or maybe you've been laid off or quit your job? So I just want you to think about this a little bit right now. I'll tell a story thinking about your answer to this. You might be stuck in a few in between, but for me, this varied a lot. When I first had my son in 2021, my first child, I was stuck in this, I feel successful but relentless. Like I was in a good, well-paying job. It offered enough flexibility because I was working from home, but I felt really restless going to work every day. And the work I was doing was not feeling that fulfilling, and I was leaving my son behind, and that was really hard. I felt personally successful, but I was just feeling really restless in my career. When I had my second son, I was like totally in the I feel fully burnt out. Like I put in 2 additional years on top of having my first. I just felt like the work was completely unaligned. I call that out because your relationship to work, whether you are pregnant, thinking about having a kid, had your first, had your second, have multiples, you're going to float in between a lot of these. I always try to talk about this question, how are you feeling right now? Not how are you feeling when you first became a mom or dad, but how are you feeling in this particular season? Because a lot of this will help identify where you want to go. I think if you're someone feeling successful but relentless or restless, you're probably someone who definitely wants to stay in a career. You're just trying to find something a little bit different. If you're fully burnt out or maybe in a transition, you might be one of those people that I could benefit from a period of time off and reflection. I'll talk a little bit more about my story. And the reason I put all these bullets as I go through is this is a reflective exercise that I think is really important to think through. I'm not going to tell you my story from the time I was a child. I talk for the next hour about this, but I do think when you're thinking about your personal brand, you do have to go a little bit back and think through each of these periods of your life, because a lot of us get conditioned when we're in a career, especially a corporate career. All you are meant to do is the job that's in front of you. And while that can include a million hats that you are wearing, it can also limit what you think your skills are or what you feel like you're set to do. I hear this all the time from people who are like, I would love to do consulting, but my skills are just so niche. Like I just focus on this one thing at this particular tech company and I don't know how I would sell it. Or you might feel like, I have been in this career for a really long time and I just have no idea how it would be applicable outside of my industry. I like to go through these 6 bullets when you think about your brand and identity, because you can create this holistic picture of actually who you are and the things that you have always really found a strong desire for. I'll talk about this in a few ways. When I look back on who I was growing up, when I asked my parents about it, they always talk about how I was a helper and a connector. I really enjoyed having larger friend groups. I liked bringing friends and groups of people together. I always went out of my way to plan parties or do things with different groups of people so they could meet each other. That definitely carried on into my adulthood. For me, that's a connector. I enjoy hosting things, educating, bringing people together, connecting the dots for people. And so that is not just something I did as a kid, that's actually who I am. And it's one of my strong suits. So when you think about that, and it might take talk with a childhood friend or a parent or an aunt or something, but just say, what was I like as a kid? Or what were things I liked doing? I've talked to people as well. Like I had a conversation with someone close the other day who was like, yeah, when I was a kid, I was always organizing things. I was always trying to organize toys in my room, line things up. I'd go to other people's houses and clean up their room. They're going on to this career path, like work in terms of not just true organization physically, but in terms of operations, like getting people's businesses set up, organizing everything that they operate with, and so on. You can see how a lot of these things actually do apply way more than you think they might. When you think about your schooling and what you did, a lot of us go to high school, perhaps college, maybe a master's, and maybe you went to business school and now you're in finance or business. For a lot of us, we're doing something completely different. But whatever skill you picked or topic you studied, there is something to say about how it can translate and apply. My background in terms of my education was psychology. I did my undergrad in psychology. I enjoyed it in high school. I went on to do a master's program in psychology. I'm clearly not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not even a certified career coach. But one thing that I really enjoy doing is understanding what makes people tick. And that kind of goes alongside with my career background. So when I think about my personal brand, I think of myself as a connector. I think of myself as really trying to get to the bottom of why people why people want to get into the careers they want, how I think through talking them through that process. And I think I do a really good job of reading people in the sense that I can help you if you're selling a product to someone or things like that. So think about your educational background and maybe write down a few notes in terms of what that looked like for you, because again, this is all building into the brand and who you are. Then I like to go into first job and reflections. And that could include a really pivotal career change for you. So my first job outside of college was I was actually a recruiter. I joined a recruiting firm and I absolutely hated it. I did it for 9, maybe 10 months before I quit. And that's when I went back to school to do my master's program. But I look back on that job because I think about what about that could I take and build into my brand. For me, it was I really enjoyed the connection piece. I liked meeting with people. A huge part of recruiting is obviously networking. What I didn't like about it was a lot of cold calling and sales because we were agency recruiters. And I realized I didn't enjoy that aspect. And that's really important in building my brand. And when I thought about consulting, a fear of mine that I wouldn't be good at selling myself because I was never good at sales. So it was something I really had to think about in terms of how am I going to create this brand for myself where I can sell myself to another company or to a consulting potential client, but think about it in a way where I don't like sales, but I do working with people. So there's a lot to be said about how your career has evolved and what things you've done and learned through it. And don't worry, we're going to get really into the true building brand and going in the next one, but hopefully these exercises are helping you. And then the biggest thing I think of all these bullets is this building a brand alongside your career. And that's what we're going to spend the next few slides talking about. And obviously you can't go back in time, but if you're earlier in your career or even just starting today, really trying to think about whatever company you work for is the place that is giving you your paycheck. It's giving you your experience, you're forming colleagues and connections, but there's still a way to separate yourself from that and really show that you are the expert, you are the one doing the skills, and you are able to educate other people. And so we're going to talk about what that is. But I think a huge part for me was from pretty much day one in my career, I had a LinkedIn profile, put a lot of time, like a few hours a week, into making that a spot where I was shown as the expert in my field. I've always been in the wellness space and in people programs, helping people with benefits. Some of that looked like posting my own thoughts on benefits, but a lot of it was just resharing information and being a source content where people could come and learn things. I credit that a lot to how easy it was for me to transition into consulting because I had not hidden behind the shell of just who my companies were, but really built that up along the way. And then experience having a first child. I think whoever or whenever it was you had a child, if you're on this call and have a child or have multiple, is that big shift in identity that changed in me with that became a huge part of my brand. So I always thought of myself as someone who advocated for parents and flexibility at work and general wellness in the workplace. And then having a kid really made me think about, okay, what are my values as a mom? What do I believe in? What type of workplace do I think I should be working for? What sort of boundaries do I believe I should have? And that went into both my brand in terms of how I talk about the benefits of consulting and the flexibility and what that's all led to. But it also helped build my brand in terms of finding an audience of like-minded people who are also frustrated with the way parents are treated or frustrated with society in terms of how we treat parents, really hopeful that there is a better way to have a career and be a parent and so on. And that leads me to this last step, which is the whole kind of premise behind both and is these 3 categories of staying, shifting, and stepping away and everything in between. So When I created the website, bothand.co, you'll see all these categories. There are many points in my life where I have stayed in my job, tried to make it work, made adjustments, gone part-time, figured all of that out. There was a moment where I shifted, leaving my career to do something different. I left my corporate job and did consulting. And then during that process, I took a solid 8 months off, which included some maternity time. I left on maternity leave and really tried to figure all this out. So I think as you're going through this and thinking about which path is right for me now, am I trying to stay in my job? Like I like my job, I like my company, or I have no choice. I have to stay at my company, but I need to adjust something, either go to lesser work, build more boundaries, offset work at home. Those are all things that can happen in that bucket. Shifting, leaving to a different job and figuring out how to do that, which is where the brand identity goes into, or stepping away and coping with the identity of who you are now that you have stepped into a different field. So let's get into more of the brand exercises. I credit a bunch of different people for coming up with these. And while they seem really simple, I've worked with 3 career coaches during my time. I have talked with a lot of friends. And I think these are 4 ways that I really simplify things when they come to me and try to say, I have no idea what I would do outside of my job. So, first one, what do people come to you for at work? And I don't mean your obvious job. So let's say you are Tina from marketing and you're like, people come to me for marketing help. A little bit deeper. It's what are things that you've noticed? If you can't think of anything, start writing this down as people come to you. But people saying, can I pick your brain about this? Or you're always so good at taglines for our presentation. Or could you help me with Excel? I don't know how to do this. What are all these little tasks that people are coming to you for? I think you need to start making a list of those, because these really become who you're an expert at, what topics you're really knowledgeable at, and things you might not even realize you did. I was in the wellness space. So if you said, what do people come to you for? I'd be like, they ask for what vendors are trending in the family benefit space. But when I really thought about it, a lot of people came to me for creativity as it related to their decks. They came to me for mom advice outside of work. They came to me for experience trying to figure out how to have difficult conversations with a manager about flexibility because they knew I'd done it. That grew into me realizing that I could actually build a new path on the consulting side in terms of helping coach people about how to creatively sell into the employer channel. It made me realize that a lot of people were coming to me trying to figure out how to talk to their bosses about flexibility, trying to figure out how to get into consulting. Write it down. If you can't think of a lot, do an exercise over the next few weeks, jot down things as you notice people coming to you, and you will see trends. And then what do friends and family come to you for? When we're trying to think about our brand identity or what we could possibly do outside of our job, we think about it in terms of what we're doing at work. But there are so many skills people have that are personal and valuable. I gave an example of someone in the organization space. This happened to another friend too. She went on maternity leave and I was constantly organizing. Like I was constantly coming up with new systems for our playroom and our house. And I remember having a friend come over and she was like, can you organize my playroom? Like half joking. And she has turned that into a home organization business. And it's something that in her last job, she was more account management and total business stuff, but she's been able to translate a personal thing that friends and family came to her for into her business. And I saw a note about the slides. I will send these slides out. They'll be posted alongside the recording. Really think about that. And a lot of times we discredit ourselves saying, I don't know, people don't really come to me for anything. But if you start paying attention and writing down those cues of what people come to you for, even if it's just advice, how to have a conversation, that's how a lot of people end up in career coaching or in different things. They were already doing those things for family and friends, like being their coach, their therapist. So just when people are like, you're so good at this, or could you help me with this? Those are things that people are coming to you for. So pay attention to those. And then what do your kids come to you for? And I know this sounds silly. My kids are only 2 and 4. So there's hardly activities we do, I feel like could translate to a career. But when I really think about it, my kids tend to come to me for creativity projects. Like they really want arts and crafts or they need help with something. They come to me for a magnetile thing they're building that they're like, Mom, you're just a little better at going slow with it and more patient than my husband. I look at those things as creativity, patience. Look at the difference between you and a partner or whoever is in your life with your kids and think about what they're coming to you for. That is a skill in itself. And a lot of times that goes into like true personality traits about your patience or your creativity or your focus or your advice, like all those things are really applicable. And then the last one, which I think is interesting, is the type of content you find yourself drawn to online. So I joke about this that I used to follow this travel blogger. I was like, oh my gosh, in another life, I would be a travel blogger and all that. But when I really thought about it, I was like, I don't actually think I do well at all being a travel blogger. I am like a homebody. But what I like about what that content person is doing is she is clearly so into the passion she's found and she's finding a way to make that a living through sponsorships and things. So I think about that to myself and I'm like, wow, I'm really drawn to these people that are taking a true passion and finding a way to monetize that. Like, I think that's really cool. And so that's like my outward goal is how do I take this huge passion I have and figure out a way to monetize it? You might be drawn to content of people who are really savvy with certain business things or talk about how they've really found this amazing part-time job or I don't know, just all sorts of things. So I think when you look at the content you find yourself drawn to, look at not just what the topic is, but why you're almost jealous or envious or could picture yourself doing that career. It says a lot about what you're really deep down trying to do. You just have to find the right way to apply it to your world. Okay, so where to build your brand. Some of these might be obvious, but I want to talk a little bit about what I did. I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. So I grew a following over the years, a little over 20,000 people. On Instagram, I started in February and it's a little over 15,000. A lot of what I focus on is trying to stay true to what I've always done. I wanted to share this as you're trying to think of ways to just not necessarily grow your brand through ways of followers, but grow it through recognition and start like finding and connecting with the right people. Because as we'll talk about the networking part, if you're going to branch out to doing something on your own or even advocating for yourself in a company, you just need to really have the confidence that you know what you're doing and that you are the true source of expertise. The company should be paying you to be part-time, or you should hire yourself as an independent business owner or whatever it might be. LinkedIn is mentioned. So I focus on posts a lot, but I also focus a lot on comments and shares. This is like the extroverted introverter's guide to building your brand because a lot of people are like, I don't want to post or I find it cringy. Posting your own content is not the only way to grow on LinkedIn. You can see impressions of comments now. If you comment on someone's post and say, this is fascinating, or this made me think this, or I feel this way about the article you shared, that gets impressions and is measured by LinkedIn and can help grow and attract people to your profile in that model. And so I always try to call that out. There's also just the concept of resharing things, adding your commentary on top of a share. I weirdly have had some shares of mine get way more likes and impressions than something I shared organically myself. So you can always reshare things and add your little twist on top of it. That gets a lot of views and things from people. I say this in building your brand because whatever field you're in, LinkedIn and some of these areas are important. For better or worse, it's still a place a lot of people go to look up people from a business sense. And so I think that is key. On the social side, I do not think you have to be on Instagram, Facebook, anything, but I say if you are, even if you're not as a poster, just make sure you're following the right people as setting alerts for their contents, looking at things they're sharing. A lot of designing your own brand is just trying to get the right people in your ecosystem. I was talking to someone the other day who had a personal Instagram and then I created this sort of like mama XYZ Instagram for myself. And all I started following was people posting about moms and careers. And it's just led to this whole environment where I'm receiving the right content about just where I'm at in my career, what I'm trying to do. And I set alerts for them so that I don't get stuck in the whole feed and I'm just caught up on different strategies and things I can do. On the reverse end, if you are creating an account, following the right people and making sure that you're getting the right things sent to you and on your feed, it can have a big impact. This sounds a little old school, but news alerts are huge. For probably 10 plus years, I've set up a news alert in Google. You basically go to Google, go to the news section and set up an alert to be sent to one of your emails on a particular topic. So when I was in the well-being space, I would search for keywords like well-being, employer, benefits, fertility, mental health, and it would be sent to my email. For work, it was daily. And then when I moved out, I did it weekly, so it wasn't bombarding. But it always allowed me to be the first to post about things or just really on top of what was going on in my industry. And so whether you are in medicine, you want to talk about parenting, coaching, art, whatever, I think it's really helpful. You're going to have to sift through some stuff sometimes, especially if you do a broad topic like parenting. But if you make it a little bit more specific, it's really helpful. And I think it helps you be on top of the news and just read things that are really applicable. And so that last big line there is you do not have to be a creator of content to add value to people. So you could just say, I am not someone who comes up with organic content. I'm not a writer. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. But you could set up those news alerts and just find really cool stories and constantly start sharing them to your socials or passing them to friends through messages or sending them to someone that you're like, hey, I thought you might find this of value. I would have potential customers on the consulting side focused on, let's say, fertility. And I would set up that alert and an article would come out about this new fertility study or a new fertility grant. And I'd be like, hey, I saw this article and thought of you. And I would send it to them. If you start to become the expert of you're always in the know of these topics, even if you're setting up those behind the scenes systems to do it, it can be really helpful. Networking and turning this into something. People come to me after they've set up their brand, figured out what they want to do, or even just are sitting at their job right now being like, I would love to get into consulting, but like, how do I actually turn it into something that will make money? There's obviously more that goes into this than just these 6 bullets, but the first part is just putting out your feelers. I always recommend, and of course, you guys have so much on your plates, but try to put out your feelers while you're still working if you have that option. So when I was in my last job, I knew eventually I wanted to get into consulting. And so I just started having those conversations. Some were just Zoom things, some were a coffee where I could meet the person in person, but I just started being like, hypothetically, if I were to do this, does this sound like something you would be interested in? Or does this sound like something anyone might buy? I just started testing out a lot of theories with friends, colleagues who I trusted, people in my general network, and just started testing out what people thought they might buy and whatnot. And people will poke holes in your ideas. And that is a good thing. A lot of people are like, I like that, but how on earth are you going to charge for it? I like that, but that's a stretch. So put out your feelers early, come up with some ideas, and really test them out. On that note, write down your scope and test it. So think about what is something I feel like I could sell? What am I doing right now in my job? Going back to that exercise of being like, what are all the things people say I'm good at that I think I could actually sell for money? And then just start testing it out. That charge with beta customers isn't applicable in everyone's world, but I think there are a lot of things that come about on LinkedIn where people want to pick your brain. And maybe it's as like a young person trying to get into your field. Sometimes it's like a vendor who wants your feedback. But I started charging for that in a way that I didn't think was possible. It was so low and I probably should have charged more. But at the beginning, I would be like, I'm happy to review your vendor product, but it will be $50. And people were like, okay, fine. And so I would just start getting that confidence of saying, wow, people are actually willing to pay for my expertise. And likewise, you might pitch yourself on something. You might see a product that you're like, I could really help that person. You can either say, I'm willing to do it for free. My typical rate's 50, or you could say, I want to charge 50, or you could go way higher and say you're 250 an hour. Just try testing it out with people, because I think you'll be surprised, as I was, of who's willing to pay and how you can really start building that confidence. And then don't be afraid to adjust. A huge part of as you take this out to market or as you start to build your own thing is you might realize what you're doing is not working. It could also be you don't enjoy doing it. A few of my clients that I first started out with, I realized my scope was too broad. I was getting too sucked into the culture. It was taking up too much time. So I went back and adjusted. And I said, I don't really want to be in Slack channels and I don't want to be added to all hands meetings. I just wanted to come in and do what I'm expected to do. And that required adjusting the scope of what I did. And then again, it is not selling, it's networking. And I think that's really important to remember, because I was never good at sales, but I am good at connecting and networking. And so I don't look at trying to find new customers at all as trying to sell myself. I look at it as I have some really cool people that I've been connected with and people they connect me with who are just networking in a way that they want to get my advice. And I am just in that network trying to help them. And your expertise, again, is key here. And something I'll say, I've been like conjuring up a whole longer write up and post about this, but do not discredit your expertise. I think every day we have conversations with people, and I met up with someone last night and even talked about this. And she said something like, oh, do you know what some acronym was? And she's, of course you do. And I gave her this blank look like, no, I actually don't. She's, oh my gosh, I always forget that not everyone knows this. And she started talking and she didn't mean it in a rude way. It's just, I do that stuff all the time too. Like I will give feedback to someone and in my head, I'm like, of course they already know that, but they don't. If you're someone like me, you're 15 years into the working world in your field, and you do know a lot more than someone 15 years behind you or just entering that field. Do not discredit your expertise. And the last thing I'll talk to you, because we don't have a ton of time and I do want to get to some questions, is just this concept of community. I think finding the right groups of people is really crucial. I've been asked a lot, are you going to start a both and community? One of the reasons I say no to that is I think it's critical that you find a group of people who are in your field or path. I think people searching for differences in their careers is great and amazing. And I want to host more of these sessions, but I think you will find so much value if you are a marketing person trying to jump into marketing consulting and you join a marketing consulting Slack group. I think if you are a mom starting a home organization business and you can get in with a local community group of people who help with local projects, that is great. So I am trying to call more attention to different groups, but really just try to find any sort of group. There's so many Slack groups, so many different communities, and a lot of them are free that you can join. So try to get in there, find your mentors. I have never had a conversation with someone where I formally asked them to be my mentor. Just find your people who you look up to, who give good advice. Your mentor doesn't actually have to be someone you have constant dialogue with. I have people who I would consider loose mentors that I follow their content on LinkedIn. I comment on it a lot. Sometimes they comment back, and they in my head are a mentor to me, even though we don't have the close relationship. So find a mix of people who you can meet with and bounce ideas off of, but also people who you just admire and respect their work and have access to their advice, whether that is free, online, whatever. And then the other part is assess your friendships. When you're in a point of life where you are transitioning and changing to something different, you do need to expand and adjust your friendships a little bit. For me, going from a world where I was working 5 days a week, overtime in tech, I noticed that so many of my friendships were people who were in that exact same boat. The stressors we were going through being normal, and that everyone in my circle was just surviving because that's what we all do. And we're all moms and we're all struggling. When I expanded and broadened my friendships to people who were stay-at-home moms or working part-time or in the consulting world, it adjusted that so much for me. And it made it so much easier for me to put my foot down a little and say, that actually wasn't normal, that toxic world I was in. And these people are so refreshing because they're not just constantly asking about my job and career. Like we're talking about home and family and all these things that are so much broader. I don't say that in a way that I lost a lot of friends. I think I just broadened my friend groups and I found people that were more in the stage of life I'm in and in the stage of career I'm in, and didn't make me feel silly for not working 5 days a week. And rather were like, yeah, isn't it so great that we're all in this world where we're working in different capacities and have flexibility, which is huge. And then join virtual sessions. Thank you all for joining this one. Wherever you see these things online, try to pop in. I think it's a way to network in itself. I see the names of all of you and I try to follow up with you. I am now here as someone you can all talk to, which I hope is helpful. I think a lot of people who are hosting these sessions, especially if they're free ones, they're doing it because they're trying to build community and they're trying to help in different ways. You'll get more hands-on support than you think and more ability to ask questions. Join the sessions, even if it seems like it's a bit of a stretch of a topic. Network in the wild. Some of the best people I have met have been not in any sort of conference setting. They were like moms or dads I talked to at the park, people at the coffee shop. I felt coffee wrong, shows I need more coffee, but people I meet at coffee shops, just people who I'm like, it was so interesting to me when I first started consulting because I would see people working at coffee shops and I'm like, I wonder if they are working full time or not. And so I would meet a lot of people who they were at a coffee shop on a Tuesday because they were a consultant. And so I was meeting these people where I'm like, oh, how cool is that you are doing this sort of interesting path to all of this too, which is really great and interesting. So yeah, just keeping doing that. And then I'll leave to the last thing I want to go over, and please put any questions in the Q&A. This is a thing I wanted to talk about toward the end, but also give a preview because we're going to do this as part of our next book club for any of you who joined it. Really think about what success means to you. I have had a lot of philosophical conversations with friends who have jumped ship from corporate or people who've adjusted their corporate by offsetting things at home and just really redefining what success is. So I want you to think for a second, what images conjure up when you hear that word success? For me, I think that's changed a lot. If you asked me 6 months ago, success, I would say my career and my goals and how my consulting was going. And those would be, regardless if I tried to combat it, that's what would pop up. Now, when you say, what does success mean to you? I truly say this, and I don't say this in a half meaning way, but success to me is really making sure my family is well taken care of, that we had a good week at home. Like, there were less meltdowns that could have been prevented. I remembered all the things for school that I was supposed to do, that we got to have a lazy day in place of something that where there was an activity because we did it during a week. And then on top of that, that I'm feeling less stressed. That is truly success to me. The book that I'm going to have be our next book club, some of you may have read this. It was written a while ago, but I think it's such a good book and so applicable to all this. It's called The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. They talk about how financial wealth is a part of wealth, but so is time, social wealth, and mental health. Your physical health builds into this big picture. This might be hard to see, but this is one of his images talking about how with time, having awareness, attention, and control over your time is a huge part of success. Do you have control over the hours in your day, or does your employer? I think that's a huge reason why a lot of people go to consulting, is for things like that. It's things like social connections. Do you have good social connections in your life? Like, they say that question, who will be sitting front row at your funeral? It's just like, how wealthy do you feel in terms of your social connections? And then on the mental side, just like, how are you feeling like you have a good sense of purpose and growth and space? Do you have time to move during the day? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping? Which I have a 2-year-old, so not a lot, but are you dedicating time to recovery and things? And then, of course, the financial side, which most of us deem the success part of just like your income and expenses, but also this concept of like, how do you define enough? And that was a big one for me when I thought about expenses. When I was in my corporate job, it was like, there's no ceiling and I want to earn as much as I can. When I left that job, it was more about how much do we really need in our lives and what does that look like? How is that impacted if I leave my job and go to consulting? What is enough for our family? I think that's a conversation no one needs to know about besides my husband and I, but it is really helpful when you look at it that way. And there's a ton of resources for that. Anyways, that is what I wanted to get to. I will stick around for a couple of minutes for Q&A. I'll send out these slides. 45 minutes goes by so fast, but I'm going to be doing more workshops like this. If there's any takeaway from this, I think it's just do a lot of reflection, like really be thinking about your day, both in work, outside, with your friendships. What is it that people come to you for? And who are you as a person and your strong suits, and not just who are you in your career? That will really help define who you're portraying yourself to be online if you're putting out content, who you're going to promote yourself to being, whether or not you're pitching a job in-house or doing your own thing. And then really thinking about longer term networking. What is it that is going to bring you the most energy? I think if you can align that work with what you're good at and what brings you joy and where you feel really fulfilled at the end of the day, you are going to be able to build this really cool career for yourself where you are dedicating time to all those areas, your family, social health, physical health, everything, and making a more holistic picture. Thank you all for joining. I hope that was helpful. I'll send out the slides. I'll send out the recording. If you did have any questions, please stay on. But if you have any feedback, please put in the Q&A too. Like, hopefully part of it resonated with you, but I am just, again, trying to share examples, my story, but also I included a lot of others who I've met with. We'll be doing more sessions in the new year with actual career coaches who are doing this side by side with me. I'm going to be doing some sessions with the woman who created my website and branding. So anything that would be helpful, please put it in here. I'm trying to keep these free so that they can be really accessible and easy. I hope that helps. I will stick around for a minute or two, but you can all hop off. Have a great day, and hopefully it was helpful. You have a good rest of your week too. Thanks, everyone. Recording.